More than 1,000 tornadoes touch down in America each year.
God. There's probably 5-inch hailstones hitting this car right now. Ah! Front back windows totally shattered.
Winds in excess of 300 miles per hour. Utter destruction. Nature's most awesome force. This is the story of the world's most awesome and spectacular tornadoes. How they devastate lives and the communities they hit. And how mankind is striving to defend itself against them.
Everything locked? Yes. Okay. I got this. My Lord!
Most people flee for their lives when a tornado strikes. But a tiny band of fanatics hunt tornadoes down. One man who gets perilously close is Jeff Petrowski.
So what's happening is the whole atmosphere is rotating. You can see it spinning. The whole thing is trying to rotate around. And it's already had one little funnel, and the winds were just a little bit stronger. It would definitely be tornadoing.
Jeff has been fascinated by tornadoes for the past 23 years.
I love nature. I love being outside. I love every chase is something different. You never know what to expect. And Mother Nature teaches me something every time I chase. Oh my God.
Decades of experience have made Jeff one of the greatest tornado chasers in the world.
Nature never gives you a second chance, a second opportunity, so you have to anticipate what's going to happen. Oh, man.
Jeff's weather warnings save lives, but he's also addicted to the adrenaline of the chase.
Let's get ready to rumble! Tornadoes on the ground. Look at the cow. There goes Pop. Ready for this? Take another picture. There's damage there. Oh my God. Okay, it's fine. Just debris. Hit this guy's house. Okay. I got it. Spill, right there. Spill it. Right behind you. Right here. I'll get it. Right now. Spill. Out the window. Back over here. Right there. Zoom in. See it. Baby, passing it. Tornado's right here. There it goes. Right here. Get in. Tornado's on the ground now. Yes, it's on the road to Medford. I'm pulling off West Medford. Go up right here. One a day. April 24th. 12 tornadoes in one day. I like getting up close and personal. A lot of times I like getting, as I say, get to ground zero, get to where it's happening, see what's going on. Because a lot of times when you're 3, 4, 5 miles off, you can't see what's actually happening. You miss a lot of details. Let go in front of us. Let go in front of us. Let me go. Go, Brian. Let me take a picture. That's great.
Jeff's passion for tornadoes is shared by others. Tom Grzoulis is so enthralled by them, he even creates and studies his own vortices. He's the world's greatest expert on tornado history. For his book, Significant Tornadoes, Tom studied the microfilm archives of every single touchdown in America since 1680.
I think I have threaded more reels of microfilm than any human being that's ever lived. About 40,000 reels over the course of 20 years.
With some 14,000 entries in his book, it's hard to pick out the most significant, but a strong contender hit the oil and cattle town of Pampa, Texas on June 8, 1995. These images are the clearest yet of the awesome forces generated by a tornado. The funnel was first spotted forming on the south side of town. In a desperate bid to warn the citizens of Pampa, radio station weatherman Darrell Seahorn tracked the tornado's every move.
We're just prior to 4 p.m. and tornadoes are forming.
Stay under cover until we give you an all clear.
I was the first to warn the citizens of Pampa to take cover. That this thing could literally rip into a community of 20,000 people and lay at waste.
And we'll stay on the air as long as we can. It's been kind of difficult to maneuver and stay out of its path.
Because we need to go in an opposite direction here. I had to turn around as it literally chased me for a time. It was frightening splendor. Beautiful, if you will, formation.
Yes, National Weather Service, Amarillo.
Darrell was also first to inform the National Weather Service of the tornado touchdown. They were already following the storm on radar and preparing to issue further warnings.
Looks like Highway 70.
Highway 70. Now, we're looking like it might go right, might skirt around the west side, but it may actually go right through the city.
Patrolling the streets of Pampa, Sheriff Randy Stubblefield was heading for a showdown with the tornado.
I could see the tornado real clear dropping down out of the clouds, and it was huge. And so I drove holding the camcorder with one hand and driving with the other hand and dodging all the cars. And all the time the tornado was dropping down, and I just couldn't believe how much, bigger it was getting, with every second.
John, make sure you mention the city of Pampa in that warning.
The National Weather Service in Amarillo has issued a tornado warning. People in Pampa and LaForge should seek shelter now. If you live in a home or apartment, seek shelter in the innermost portion of the building on the lowest floor.
Not sure which way it is. I'm definitely on the ground. Was moving north, and now looks like it's moving a little bit east at this time.
I'm in the mobile unit. Reporting on red 810.
Go ahead.
The tornado was heading straight for Bob Schiffman's machine shop.
Then it finally moved over here, and we picked up this one. In between these two buildings here is where the big black one came at, and across the railroad tracks, and there was a couple of big steel tanks there that it began to roll, and moved on down here in front of behind my building rather. It's way over there, and of course it sat there for the longest time, and all that time it's just growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Jose, they have a large tornado in Pampa, moving due east now, doing lots of damage.
Moments later, the tornado tore through the heart of the industrial park. Just yards away was Jim Ashford.
And it got us close to this oil well right over here, and that's 163 steps from my shop. But as the storm approached and came over here, I stepped out around the corner of the building and watched it take out the building that you see down the street here that's gray.
Traffic coming down McCullough there.
Okay, I'm on 60. I'm going to try to shut off everything coming in. It's a quarter mile north of the railroad tracks, a half mile west of Price Road. So I drove to this crossing where we're at now, and I was blocking traffic, not letting anybody come into Pampa, and trying to, do my duties as a sheriff. Well, that's when I decided I better take the camera and zoom in and see if I could tell what buildings were being destroyed. I thought I was seeing was parts of the building, the sides and the doors and the roof and all that. But actually what it was vehicles being picked up and thrown around, camp trailers, boats, just a tremendous debris.
The vehicle that you see that went up in the sky in Randy's film, I watched that go and I couldn't believe it. But in addition to that, which is not on the film because he was so far away, there was a tractor trailer, a big semi-rig, an 18-wheeler, that was thrown just like a toy.
This is the most dramatic video evidence ever collected of the brutal power of a tornado.
Down at B&G Electric, the woman was a very good friend of mine and her dad, and she was pulled through 7 partition walls and her dad through 5.
There used to be a boat, several new cars, and a house here. Ted Quillen fled to the cellar in his garden just seconds before the tornado struck.
As it got close enough to where it was throwing rocks and dirt and stuff in my face, I opened the cellar door and went in, and the noise is unbelievable. And then suddenly there's a vacuum. You can't talk or even really think good and clear.
Ted's dog was also in the cellar, but he couldn't save its life.
The door flew open, and the dog ran up to the bottom of the steps. When she ran up to the bottom of the steps, the vacuum and the wind and so forth jerked her on out of there. And it's the last time I seen her alive. When I looked up to see where she went, I was looking at the inside of an F4 Tornado.
In 60 seconds, everything Ted owned was obliterated. By now, sirens were sounding across Pampa. There was chaos on the roads as residents tried to flee.
Is everything locked?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I got this sucker. My Lord! Now, Mama, go somewhere and let me look at it.
We're going to First Baptist. Mary,
God dang it!
we can either go to First Baptist or we can go to the cellar next door to Mom's.
Mama, don't pass them. Stay behind them.
Hurry, you fool! They're going slow. They're watching it be a tornado.
The tornado finally lifted just above the center of town. Daryl Sehorn's early warnings helped ensure that not a single life was lost.
Probably from the time that I sounded a take cover until it entered the city, probably was about a 20-minute span of time. So people had time to take cover.
The Pampa tornado was one of a record 21 to hit the Texas Panhandle that day. The spectacular video footage is still being studied by scientists. The tornado had been on the ground for just 11 minutes, but the damage was extraordinary. Steve Clark, from a local TV station, spent 48 hours documenting the destruction on camera.
I grabbed camera and batteries, and we took off on foot because a lot of the streets were blocked with debris. The damage was just so intense that when you saw one thing and you thought, you know, my goodness, how did that happen? How could it have done that? There was a lot of folks that were in shock, that they just really didn't understand why it happened to them.
This was the B&G building, where the force was so great that 2 people were sucked through the walls. Documents from here were later found 120 miles away.
My son Matthew worked at B&G Electric, and his little Ford Explorer was out there, and it was picked up, moved about 100 foot and turned totally around. There is a 2x4 cut, wedged, and drove through the back of the seat where my grandson would normally be sitting.
Massive industrial machinery was tossed through the air by the tornado. This 30-ton lathe had been bolted to the floor. Workers later discovered it 40 feet away. The community rallied round to help the tornado's victims and couldn't believe what they found.
His boat trailer's up in this tree over here, and part of a truck is over in this area too, we found. And it's just horrible. There's nothing left. The man has nothing.
Years later, Misty's still amazed how little remained of Ted Quillen's house.
And I kept thinking, we're going to find something big. And we looked out back behind us as a field, and we walked all the way out there. We walked in this field over here. And the biggest thing we found was a piece of his kitchen floor about the size of a tabletop was it.
I spent probably a year and a half searching these fields, trying to find something.
More than 100 other houses were struck that day.
Insulation was the worst thing. It was scattered all over town, hanging in trees and everything else. My house still had water. This house still had electricity, and that house still had a telephone. And there wasn't nothing in it except 4 walls, but the telephone still worked.
My whole experience, it was very humbling. It has given me a great respect for tornadoes. I don't have a fear of them, but I have a very great respect for what they can do. Because in a matter of just seconds, they could wipe you out, take your life, or they could leave you alone and wipe out your neighbor.
The Pampa tornadoes wiped out hundreds of vehicles, but just 4 years later, 10 times as many were destroyed in Oklahoma City.
There were cars a quarter of a mile away in some cases, from what I've heard. They were raining down out of the sky, basically. Well, I've heard estimates as high as 40,000 cars.
Windshield is busted.
Cars are always vulnerable, and it's not only tornado winds that cause the damage.
These are probably 5-inch hailstones hitting this car right now.
In just 4 minutes, this car was wrecked.
Front and back windows are just totally shattered.
The reality is destruction like this. But in the world of advertising, the awesome power of tornadoes has been harnessed to make cars look indestructible.
A tornado is a rapidly rotating column of air in contact with the ground. It comes from thunderstorms.
The driver in the commercial was real-life tornado chaser Gene Roden.
This commercial took some 40 hours of 35mm motion picture film and dwindled it down to that. But it took about 3 weeks to film in areas of the desert, Mojave Desert, north of Los Angeles, and also in Hollywood itself. The tornado was created by a company called Real Effects out of North Hollywood, California, and they had actually produced the largest man-made vortex machine ever made.
But to anyone thinking of imitating Gene's advertising exploits, the advice is, don't.
The automobile is probably about the worst place you can imagine to be in during a tornado. Cars, mobile homes, you yourself out in the open, exposed to debris. None of those areas are anchored down very well. So you just become airborne, or you're just bounced along the ground and mixed up with a bunch of debris, and it's just the worst place you can imagine.
Gene's own films of tornadoes are both beautiful and spectacular.
Tornadoes are so violent and so mesmerizing. I don't know what it is about a rotating column. It's just amazing to see so much power concentrated in a small area like that. And actually, there are not that many people out there that have seen tornadoes. But for the people who have, it's kind of like they've joined a club. You know, the tornado club. They've experienced or have gone through a tornado and have survived, and they can tell their grandchildren about it.
Some of the most distinguished members of that club are meteorologists. For them, observing and understanding tornadoes is vital to saving lives.
In order to study the tornadoes, you need to go and be where they are, when they are. And since some tornadoes last for 20 minutes or less, sometimes only for a minute or so, and since they're relatively small, sometimes only about 100 meters across, we need to be in exactly the right place at the right time, and that's a tremendous challenge.
Scientific research has come a long way since it started in the 1800s. Early attempts were valiant but crude. Take the work of Elias Loomis in 1842, for example.
There had been reports that chickens had their feathers ripped from their bodies during tornadoes, so he tried to determine what sort of wind speed would rip a feathers from chickens, and thereby get an estimate of wind speeds in tornadoes.
Unfortunately for local chickens, Loomis did know the speed a ball flew out of a cannon, so he decided to fire some chickens from one to see if they lost their feathers at that speed. The results were predictably messy and totally inaccurate. The 20th century saw a rapid growth in tornado knowledge. In 1948, Air Force personnel Ernest Fawbush and Robert Miller were the first to forecast a tornado. Just hours later, it hit their base in Oklahoma City. Dallas, 1957. One of the first extensively filmed and photographed tornadoes. It moved slowly enough for over 100 people to grab their cameras.
In 1961, the landscape of tornado research was changed. It's the first time anyone actually chased down a tornado. Neil Ward, a researcher at the National Severe Storm Laboratory, tracked down, using the Oklahoma City radar and a radio link with the radar from the Highway Patrol, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and actually got to a tornado and photographed it.
Dateline, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, June 23rd, 1969.
By the end of the decade, a severe weather warning system was in place. But this old TV film had a highly optimistic view of its effectiveness.
Thanks to a new and elaborate warning system devised in cooperation with the United States Weather Bureau, most deaths caused by the tornadoes can be alleviated.
Since this film was made, more than 2,000 people have been killed by tornadoes. By the 1970s, scientists had even more footage to study. This film of a Kansas tornado was particularly significant. Measuring the distance debris moves between each frame of film gave more accurate estimates of wind speeds inside the tornado. The 1970s also saw major advances in the use of Doppler radar to predict tornadoes and save lives.
Doppler radar, unlike conventional radar, can sense not only the reflectivity of the raindrops and hail and whatever's out there, but it can also sense the motion. It can determine whether or not the rain or dust or debris inside a storm is moving towards you or away from you, and it can also determine the speed.
And in 1973, for the first time, a chase group actually surrounded a tornado with cameras, a tornado that was being studied by Doppler radar at the same time, a real landmark.
The Union City tornado struck near the National Severe Storms Laboratory in Oklahoma, the heartland of tornado research. For the first time, the full life cycle of a tornado was captured on camera. That cycle consists of the organizing stage, as the funnel appears to reach for the ground, the mature stage, when it's visible on the ground, the shrinking stage, and finally the decaying stage, when the tornado dissipates. There were other breakthroughs too. Analysis of radar data alongside the filmed life cycle enabled forecasters to spot a developing tornado far earlier than before. The earlier warnings this produced have since saved thousands of lives. 2 residents of Union City were killed by the tornado, and others who saw it have never forgotten it.
As I parked in the neighbor's drive and came over to the house, it was quite large right here, I just ran through the house and went to the cellar where the rest of the family was. And then just in a few seconds it was here, and then it was just utterly devastating. Then after that, just nothing was left then when we came out. Just the clothes you had on was all that you had. Everything else was gone.
It comes straight through town here, and then it got us out on the farm. And what it did, we had a 2-story home, and it lifted up the upstairs and collapsed the bottom and set the upstairs back on it.
Technological advances made possible after Union City and new research tools like mobile radar are still improving warning times. But where do the scientists go now?
We're at the point at which we now have the basic tools to go out and study the complete life of a tornado. But we still have yet to make measurements with all the different suite of instruments that we have on the same storm at the same time.
Yeah, how about the weasel?
Meet Sharon Fisher and her brothers Gerald and Jimmy. As children, they lived on this farm in Bowdle, South Dakota. It was an idyllic place to grow up. But on July 1st, 1955, a tornado almost claimed Sharon's young life.
I rode in front of the car with the horse, and my mother followed. My brothers and my sister were crying because they were hot. I want to go home. So they took off ahead of me.
Minutes later, a storm exploded from seemingly nowhere.
That's about the time the funnel cloud just touched down.
Oh my God! Tornado!
I do remember the noise of like a train, this awful noise, and the horse just like panicked. Something scared him, frightened him, And to me, it appeared like the horse turned around and took off running. And next thing I know, I was turned around and being taken up into the air.
Mother tells us that basically when Sharon was picked up, she looked like a ball of wire up there turning.
Sharon flew over 3/4 of a mile, 100 feet in the air.
I don't remember a thing of the flight itself. I just remember the horse acting funny, and the next thing I know, I was in this ditch. And I remember holding tight to these weeds that were in the ditch because it felt like I was still going to be going somewhere.
Sharon is convinced she flew and landed still seated upon the horse, but it was found alone, seemingly unaffected by what had happened.
I was hearing these people call my name, they kept saying, Sharon, Sharon, just panically. And I just could not respond. It was like I was froze right to that spot and just couldn't holler back. It just wouldn't come through.
Oh my gosh, Sharon!
Sharon literally had the breath sucked out of her by the tornado. It was a miracle that she survived.
I think, gee, I really was a lucky person. At the time, at 9 years old, you're going to live forever. And I was very fortunate that nothing happened, but I'm still here to talk about it.
Remarkable stories of ordinary people coming face to face with tornadoes have a vital new ingredient these days: home video. Floyd Zahn grabbed his camera when a tornado formed in front of his Texas home in 1997.
Above the house, looks like it's going to drop down on top of our house, but hopefully it won't. Look at that tail coming down, will you?
None of the phones would work. I gave up on that, and my boy, who had been upstairs, Ronnie, he went outside and said, "Come look at this, Dad."
Hurry up before he gets here. That's right there. Isn't that something? There's the bottom of it.
Let's go inside now.
I'm okay. Get in here.
The debris cloud a couple of blocks away, it looked like a couple of blocks.
Isn't that something?
We started watching, and it looked like small chips of wood, and it looked like a swarm of bees, really. It was a pretty good sized tornado.
Well, if it gets over here, we're going to hit it off.
So at that time, we retreated in the house, had a heck of a time shutting the door. And then all the glass started busting in the house.
Almost every window in the house is breaking, Dad.
Don't worry about it, son.
Dude, come here. Get it off.
It won't last long.
There's a small one.
Where's your Jeep?
Right in the wind. I don't think I have a top one.
That lasted probably a good 2-3 minutes. I think just about every glass in the house broke out.
Years later, and still awestruck by what they saw, Floyd and his family watched the video regularly. Connie Zahn was on her way home when the tornado struck their house.
She was crying and bawling the time she saw us, and glad to see us alive, and I'm glad to see her that she's fine. But she was hysterical for a good hour.
Connie's hysteria was understandable. She'd heard reports on the car radio about the same tornado outbreak devastating the nearby town of Jarrell. At this stage in its life, it was a full-scale F5 tornado, which killed 27 people. Such is the power of tornadoes that all sorts of myths have arisen around them. A common one has it that tornadoes never strike cities. This has been disproven time and time again, but nowhere more spectacularly than Miami, Florida in May 1997. TV weatherman John Gerard saw it forming.
I noticed these very, very dark clouds, and there was a bit of rotation. So we ran outside, we turned on the studio lights, I put my tie and my jacket back on, and this is where it gets really interesting. It makes my hair stand on end because it's one of the most exciting weather days I've ever had.
It's no longer a funnel cloud, it is now
a full-scale tornado. It's hard to say exactly how strong. Looks like about an F0, maybe an F1, and getting stronger. And I was trying to describe what was happening as if we were color commentating a football game. You folks right there get to the first floor immediately because trouble is on the way.
Horrified workers in this building watched the tornado approach.
As our attention was drawn down to the ground level where the tornado was doing the damage, it was, of course, far below us here. And so we had a most unique vantage point.
The tornado first touched down in the residential area of Little Havana.
The energy of the tornado becomes so focused, so wrapped down to a small drill bit. I remember very well my concern as it approached the highway that it might overthrow cars and throw them off the elevated highway.
Orlando Mora used to live in these apartments. When the tornado struck, he had just gotten home.
I was reading my mail and I heard a noise like a train was coming. Then all of a sudden, glass was flying round the room. I dropped to the floor and put my hand on my head. Everything in the room was turning. It was very dark and then very light. It all happened in 10 or 20 seconds. This was a small tornado. If it were any stronger, I wouldn't be here today.
But the greatest spectacle was yet to come as the tornado left dry land and plowed into Biscayne Bay. It became a waterspout.
That's where the tornado came right in through. And right where the construction site is where the circular motion came, but the mushroom oversought this whole area. And as you look at this causeway, it was really neat to look at because all of the cars were stopped. Buses and cars stayed up on here, and people were all out just gawking because nobody had ever seen one.
As the waterspout crossed the MacArthur Causeway, bus driver Hugo Louison and his 80 passengers came face to face with it. All he could do was pull over and pray to pass straight over them.
It then picked up off the water right over the Venetian island and just dissipated and twirled its way back up into the heavens as gracefully as it had come down from over here during its birth.
It was only a small-scale tornado. The winds were clocked at about 100 to 110 miles an hour, but through most of the life of this tornado, it was about 75 to 80 miles an hour. What made it look so spectacular was the fact that it was sucking up all this water, creating a vivid funnel.
The waterspout that was born out of the Miami tornado was certainly not Florida's first. Joe Golden has spent decades studying these spectacular phenomena.
A waterspout is a very close cousin to the land-based tornadoes. I've studied both of them, and we've discovered that the Florida Keys and South Florida are the world's capital for waterspout activity.
As well as tornadoes and waterspouts, Florida is routinely hit by other extreme weather. It's one of the lightning capitals of the world. Lightning strikes and extreme heat start over 2,000 forest fires every year, destroying up to 500,000 acres of land. The state also suffers up to 10 hurricanes a year. Such natural disasters cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But even that can't compare with the havoc caused in 1999 by the most costly twister ever known. The tornado outbreak in Oklahoma in May was to bring unparalleled destruction to the state. The most deadly tornado of all was tracked and filmed at close quarters by Jeff Petrowski.
That particular day I was on the road probably about 16 hours and covered about 750 miles that day. I was all over the state of Oklahoma virtually. It's KC5 GLA. I'm going to be south on 52.
Jeff's skill lies in his amazing ability to predict the unpredictable. More often than not, he's at the right place at the right time.
We did have a storm exploding. They had a rotating wall cloud. It was starting to drop to the ground just west of I-44. And then a few seconds later, the tornado started coming down to the ground. That was the first tornado of the day, just north of Lawton.
As Jeff approached the small community of Chickasha, he could see two tornadoes.
And it literally came right at me. Golf ball hail's falling. Tornado weakens as it crosses Highway 9, gets just north of me, intensifies again, and then all of a sudden I see two tornadoes on the ground again, and then it merges to one big tornado, and then it goes and hits the Chickasha Airport. Oh my God, it's done major damage. Oh my God. Oh my God. Break. Major damage at the airport. I repeat, major damage at the airport. It's leveled entire buildings. It's leveled entire buildings.
Jeff realized he was tracking a major tornado. It was almost a mile wide.
It's the biggest tornado I've seen in 23 years out here in the plains of chasing tornadoes. And I knew at that point, I had a really bad, sick feeling in my stomach that something really horrible was going to happen. It was getting bigger and bigger and meaner as it moved northeast.
Jeff was literally racing the tornado. Contained winds of more than 300 miles per hour, the tornado was charging towards Oklahoma City. Jeff did all he could to save lives by sending radio warnings of the terror about to hit each community.
As it's moving into the subdivision, I'm on the radio with the amateur radio with Norman Weather, talking about where it's located. Tornado continues to come into more, and it's just a tremendous roar. Southwest 134th, approaching Pennsylvania. It's getting ready to come into a subdivision on the southwest of that intersection. It's coming into the subdivision.
So any stations listening in that area take immediate precautions.
By now, Jeff was in great danger himself.
It's crossing eastern right now. And as it turns right here, I'll stop right here. Stand by. There it goes. Telephone poles are coming crashing down beside me. I realize I'm too close. I've got to back up. It just took out this whole area.
Jeff's chase lasted well into the evening.
Hello. My God. 240. I just got a really bad, sick feeling that I just witnessed probably the worst Oklahoma tornado in U.S. history happened right here in Oklahoma on May 3rd, 99, and it's one of those things that you never want to see happen.
The final death toll from the Oklahoma outbreak was 42. Out of the tragic events of that day came the most astonishing stories of courage and dignity. Stories like those of young parents Samantha and Dion Darnell.
We were only in the closet for maybe just 10, 15 seconds when the wind hit the house. And like she said, you could hear it just, every window in it just shattering.
We were all sitting on the floor and we just began praying and for God to protect us. And you could, all of a sudden you could just hear all the glass being broke out in the house. And then you could literally hear the boards splintering in the house. You could just hear the house being ripped apart.
I remember the walls just basically being there 1 second and being gone the next. They were just gone. And being bombarded by the wind and just every object that the wind could pick up and hurl at us.
Just a few miles away, school administrator Kathy Turner had watched the tornado from her home. As she drove to check on her school, a living nightmare lay ahead.
As we were driving up to the school, one of the firefighters said, "Mrs. Turner, we need you inside the middle school gym right away. We need someone in charge of triage." So I went into the gym. My husband went with me, and we started taking care of people and trying to determine who was most critical and needed immediate care, and who could wait a little bit.
Among the seriously injured cared for by Kathy that night were Dion and Samantha.
The next thing I remember is being up at the school, and I rolled over, and his dad was beside me, and he was just covered in blood, and Dion was on the other side of him. I heard Dion talking, but I didn't see him.
So I went back into the gym to check on people, and I saw Samantha, and I checked on her. I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I'm going to be okay, but I need you to take care of my baby for me." I said, okay, I'll take care of your baby. And I saw her husband, and he said, "Find my baby."
Downed trees and debris made it impossible for the medical emergency services to reach the area. So in this gymnasium, with no previous experience of such a disaster, Kathy suddenly found herself in charge of a morgue.
And they started bringing in body after body, and I had to help identify them. And these were my neighbors and my friends. And we ended up with 11 bodies total. Finally, about 1 o'clock in the morning, I think that's when the last person was brought in.
Among the dead was Ashton, Samantha and Dion's baby boy. He was just 3 weeks old.
I knew it was her baby. And so I picked up his little body, and I held it for a while, and I rocked it, and I tried to just to love him like a mother would love him, and I kissed his brow, and I just held him quite a while.
Weeks after the tragedy, Kathy was to meet up again with Ashton's grieving parents. Both of them have found great comfort in the care that Kathy gave their baby boy.
I guess it's just that that motherly instinct to want to take care of him, even though, he is already gone. And I'm so thankful that he did. And I'm so glad that he didn't have to be alone, and that you were there to take care of him.
There were other human tragedies in this community. 12 people were killed here, and dozens of homes were destroyed.
The Oklahoma City tornado of 1999 goes down in the record books as the first billion-dollar tornado. The previous record, a $500 million, was at Wichita Falls in 1979. That record stood for 20 years. Hopefully, the Oklahoma City record will stand for even longer.
Jeff Petrowski thrives on close-up encounters with the awesome forces of a tornado, but he was deeply affected by the human tragedy he saw that day in Oklahoma.
When you have thousands of people's lives changed in a matter of seconds from these killer tornadoes, it's very saddening. I mean, I live here, I was born and raised in Oklahoma, and anytime anybody gets, wife, mother, dad, grandma, and grandpas, people get hurt, killed, and injured, it changes people's lives forever.